Welcome to Football Kingdom, a football podcast recapping the previous week of the NFL season, a podcast that is typically hosted by two people, Tyler Mallon and myself, Brandon Johnson. I know over the past month, we've just been kind of ping-ponging back and forth, Tyler and I doing solo episodes, and once again this week, I am going to be flying solo. Again, I'm Brandon Johnson, and hopefully next week we'll both get back on the microphone together and talk some football. I know we'll have a lot to talk about. We just really over the last month plus, Tyler and I's schedules have not aligned as far as being able to sit down together and host a podcast. So we've just been kind of exchanging solo hosting duties, and I think both been doing a fine job in doing that. So, again, a solo show this week, but let's go ahead and hop into it. So, we're through 6 weeks of the NFL season. We're heading into week 7, and I feel like this happens every year where the NFL season just flies by. Like, I feel like we're going to be previewing the Thanksgiving slate before we know it, just because it goes so quick. But I feel like a lot has happened over the last week plus as far as league news goes. So we'll get into that. Obviously, the Chiefs were on a bye week this week in week 6. So they didn't play. So we don't have anything really to recap there. But with the Chiefs not playing, they remained undefeated. They're 5-0. They're still atop the AFC. And we'll head to San Francisco this week to have a Super Bowl rematch. But we will get to that here in a bit. First, I want to talk league news. If you haven't heard already, Davante Adams, Las Vegas Raiders wide receiver, has been traded to the New York Jets. In exchange for Davante Adams, the Las Vegas Raiders will receive a conditional 2025 third-round pick, and that third-round pick can become a second-round pick if Davante Adams becomes a first- or second-team All-Pro this season, or if he's on the active roster, should the Jets make the AFC Championship game or the Super Bowl. And that's from Tom Pelissero. And I believe that the Raiders were initially seeking a second-round pick for this, and it could be likely that Adams is able to accomplish being a first or second team All-Pro. I don't know if the Jets are an AFC Championship team, let alone a Super Bowl team. But this Davante Adams situation is interesting because he's been unhappy for a couple months now. And I feel like I usually see scenarios like this play out in the NBA. Not that they don't happen in the NFL, but I watch a lot of the National Basketball Association, and I feel like often there's a superstar player that decides that they're done in a certain situation. And most of the time, I'm like, get over it, and just play the game and get through the season and talk about it in the offseason. And that's just seems to be an NBA player thing. I can think of multiple players off the top of my head that have done that, where they're just like, I'm done with the situation. James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and I'm sure there's others. And again, I usually find myself annoyed at those players for doing things like that, but I found myself with Davante Adams kind of in his corner here of, I think I would want out of Las Vegas as well. So let's kind of rewind back to when Davante Adams initially got to Las Vegas. If you remember, the Green Bay Packers traded Davante Adams for a first and second round pick a couple of years back. And this was kind of the beginning of the end of the Aaron Rodgers era in Green Bay. Davante Adams left a season prior to Aaron Rodgers. And Davante Adams goes to Las Vegas, and he's teaming up with his college quarterback in Derek Carr. And honestly, with a serviceable Derek Carr and a Davante Adams that at the time was arguably the best wide receiver in the league. He's still a top 5 receiver, in my opinion, in the league. But having those two paired with a promising defense. It felt like the Las Vegas Raiders were taking a step in the right direction. Now, I don't feel like the Raiders were ever Super Bowl contenders, but I felt like they could play competitive football and find themselves in a playoff race and maybe get a little bit of respect. If you remember, this was around the same time that the Denver Broncos got Russell Wilson and felt like the Broncos were going to be better, the Raiders were going to be better. The Chargers had already kind of proven that they were contenders in the AFC West, and then obviously we know that, the resume that the Chiefs had already put together to that point where we were like, wow, the AFC West is going to be the best division in football. And obviously we know how all that played out. The AFC West is still terrible outside of the Chiefs. But kind of getting back to the Raiders with Davante Adams and Derek Carr. So the Raiders in year one, towards the end of the season, sit Derek Carr and then basically intend to move on from him. And I would imagine that Derek Carr was a huge reason why Davante Adams chose the Raiders anyway. So you took Derek Carr away from Davante Adams, and now since Derek Carr has left, you've had a just carousel of quarterbacks come into the Raiders facility. You've had Jimmy Garoppolo, Aiden O'Connell, Jared Stidham, Gardner Minshew, and I feel like there might be one that I'm missing, but there just hasn't been consistency at the quarterback position since Derek Carr has left, and there's really no direction with where the Raiders are going. There's really not a lot of promise as far as where the team is headed, and I think Davante Adams is probably like, I don't want to play here because I don't really know what's going on. And, fast forward to today, Davante Adams gets traded to the Jets for the conditional third that I mentioned earlier in the show, and that reunites him with his old quarterback, Aaron Rodgers. Now, I don't really know if Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers playing together just ultimately makes the Jets a Super Bowl contender, because if that were the case, they, the last couple of years in Green Bay, they would have been Super Bowl contenders, and that wasn't the case. Because I still think the Bills are better than the Jets in that division. The Bills just beat the Jets on Monday Night Football. And you still have teams like the Chiefs and a Houston Texans team that is really good, along with the Ravens. I think the Bengals are going to bounce back and be a playoff threat down the stretch. And yeah, not that the Jets can't make it, but I don't know if I feel any better about the Jets today than I did a week ago or 2 weeks ago. And sticking with the Jets moved on from their head coach, Robert Saleh, and I'm a little surprised by it, mainly because it's early, and I don't necessarily feel like the Jets' season was lost by any means, and I still don't feel like it is based on some things I said a minute ago. But it just kind of tells me that, okay, this is the Aaron Rodgers show, and he's kind of maybe pulling all the strings. Robert Saleh's gone. All of a sudden, we're trading for Davante Adams, and we're just going to kind of see how this all plays out with that scenario. But it's interesting. I thought that Doug Peterson or Nick Sirianni would really be the first ones to go. I do think that Nick Sirianni is done. You saw the Eagles squeaked by the really bad Browns, and Nick Sirianni's chirping with players in the stands in Philadelphia. So I don't think he has that locker room. He clearly doesn't have that fan base. So I don't think that Nick Sirianni's long for Philadelphia, and Doug Peterson, unfortunately, is probably on his way out as well. The Jaguars are bad, and they shouldn't be bad, and they are. I'm starting to think that Doug Peterson might be an overrated head coach in the NFL. Outside of 2017, when the Eagles won it all, he was 7-9, 9-7, 9-7, 4-11-1, 9-8, 9-8, and he's currently 1-5. So again, outside of 2017, is really just average and below average. And even in 2022, when Jacksonville made the playoffs, they had to win 8 straight games to make the playoffs. I believe they were 1-8 and finished the season 9-8. And then last year, 9-8, were the favorites to win the division, the AFC South. And yes, Houston was a surprise team and ended up winning the South, but Jacksonville had no business missing the playoffs altogether. And this season is lost again with like I said, the 1-5 record that Jacksonville has. And I don't see Doug Peterson being around much longer. And we actually have some breaking news on this podcast right now. So I was actually going to spend the next couple minutes talking about how the Chiefs should trade for Amari Cooper. But as I'm saying this, it just came in, and this is from Ian Rappaport of NFL Network, that the Bills are trading for Amari Cooper, sending a 3rd-round pick and a pick swap. So Amari Cooper, who was kind of rumored to potentially be going to San Francisco prior to the season and was an obvious trade candidate, at least heading into the deadline with how the Browns are playing. He's now on his way to Buffalo. So Buffalo, they needed a wide receiver, and I really liked the thought of the Chiefs getting Amari Cooper. I never thought that the Chiefs would get Davante Adams. Clearly the Raiders are not going to trade inside the division, let alone the Kansas City Chiefs. But yeah, Amari Cooper is now a Buffalo Bill. So with that news, I'm kind of looking at some other kind of pending free agent wide receivers that could be on the trade block. So like T. Higgins is a free agent coming up. I don't think that Cincinnati has any reason to trade to the Kansas City Chiefs. Deontay Johnson in Carolina is somebody to look at. DeAndre Hopkins could be interesting for the Chiefs. He could be somebody that they go out and try to get, because the Titans clearly are not going anywhere this season, so he's somebody that could be on the move. Clearly, trades are starting to ramp up, and we'll see kind of where some of these players start to move, but those are some names that I could potentially see at least being in the conversation for the Kansas City Chiefs acquiring them after the news of Davante Adams and Amari Cooper being moved. But I do want to talk some Kansas City Chiefs and San Francisco 49ers, because that is the next matchup for the Chiefs, and that's going to be a 3:25 game on Fox, a rematch of the most recent Super Bowl. And I think for the Chiefs, they're 5-0. San Francisco's 3-3. This game means way more to San Francisco than it does Kansas City. Obviously, both from a record standpoint and San Francisco like needing some sort of boost in, we finally beat the team that's beat us twice in recent Super Bowl matchups. Kansas City Chiefs destroyed the 49ers a couple seasons ago in San Francisco. So for me, this is like big for the 49ers and an effort to just like, we finally beat them. And I don't think, I won't feel really any type of way if the Chiefs go out and lose this game. I feel like the Chiefs are going to win, because I think that they're the better team, and, you know, they have all these injuries and have shown that they're just going to figure it out. Like the game against the Saints, heading into it, the game plan was, we're just going to spread the ball around, and it's exactly what the Chiefs did. 8 different Chiefs players caught a football against the New Orleans Saints, and the Chiefs have yet again another great defense. But yeah, against the San Francisco 49ers, I just think the Chiefs are going to do more of the same. They're going to continue to get Travis Kelce involved and have high volume games. Juju Smith-Schuster coming off of a really great game against the Saints. He had 7 catches for 130 yards. I don't expect him to do that again this week, but probably more volume from him. Xavier Worthy continues to get more looks. Kareem Hunt has been a huge positive since coming to the Chiefs earlier this season. He's been really productive, and the thought of Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt kind of carrying this backfield in that second half of the season is really intriguing for me. And honestly, the success of Kareem Hunt may tempt the Chiefs to rest Isaiah Pacheco even longer. So obviously we've got a long way to go, but I really like the Chiefs in this game. And, I'm sticking with the Chiefs until they give me a reason to pick against them. I said it last season, there were a lot of reasons to pick against the Chiefs, and they defied all of those odds and won the Super Bowl anyway. So really anything that gets thrown the Chiefs' way this season, I'm like, yeah, I know what they overcame last season. I know what Patrick Mahomes overcame the season before with the high ankle sprain. So this Chiefs team, particularly in the regular season, I'm just not even concerned about really wins and losses. I'm just, once we get to January, that's where the Chiefs tend to play their best football. And, with all that being said, like the Chiefs over the 49ers, and for the Chiefs to continue to stay undefeated. That's all I have this week on Football Kingdom. I will see you to recap the Chiefs 49ers game. If you're enjoying the show, please remember to leave a review or a rating. That helps with our exposure and our growth. Would much appreciate that. See you next week.